from it soon, but anything else, or you got that resolved?
Yeah, I'm ready to go whenever you are.
Okay. We call this November 3rd, 2022 meeting of the EMA Advisory Committee order. It is 2:32. Can we do the roll call for us, please?
Yes, Mr. Lyon.
Here.
Miss Acton.
Here.
Mr. Coy.
Here.
Sean Baskey for Todd Van Ho.
Here.
Kent Colhayes. Here. Luke Boland.
Here.
Mr. Stichik. Mr. Buffalo is excused. Mr. Lindemood.
Present.
Kent Colhayes.
Here.
And Yemi Alini.
Present.
The loudspeakers today. So as just a quick reminder to everyone, please speak really loud. As we've been indicated, people are having a hard time hearing the committees because everyone's speaking so softly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Will you also do the public involvement announcement?
Of course, AMS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by staff or consultant. Then the committee is given a chance to discuss the item. Once the discussion is over, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you are joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Next before us, we have the agenda, and we've indicated, Aaron, that the item 6A of December.
Yes, that was an error on our part. We had talked about moving the model information to December, and it just didn't get taken off the agenda before it was posted.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, are there any objections to approving the agenda with item 6A? Okay, no objections. The agenda is approved. Next on the agenda are the meeting minutes from October 13th. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Objections? The October 13th, 2022 meeting minutes are approved. Action item 5A, 92nd Avenue undercrossing update.
I'll give a quick hello before we get into it. So as you may recall, the policy committee tasked the technical advisory committee with doing kind of a fact-finding gathering of information about a possible change to the project, the Seward Highway Diamond to O'Malley that includes the 92nd Avenue undercrossing. The policy committee asked the TAC to look into the viability of if that could be changed to a non-motorized only undercrossing. And so that was drafted in a letter from the TAC. The TAC added in information about getting cost estimates of what it would be if we were to do a non-motorized over crossing or a non-motorized undercrossing. So the presentation today will be from Christina Huber with DOT, and she'll give information. So we're going to change over to the, you got to share the. Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. In response to your letter of September 12th, this presentation will briefly discuss the DOT and PF project to improve the Seward Highway between O'Malley and Diamond, including alternative options for the 92nd Avenue area. Slide 1 is a high-level overview of the current design. It includes a diverging Diamond interchange at O'Malley, modifications to the interchange at Diamond, and a roundabout interchange at 92nd. This slide includes only the 92nd Avenue area and shows in red the non-motorized facilities in the current design. These include bike lanes and either sidewalks or separated paths on Braden, Academy, and the undercross. Their letter requested concept level designs, analysis, and cost estimates for non-motorized crossings only, with at least one option over the highway and at least one option under the highway. This is, yeah, I said that too soon. This is a typical section of the undercrossing as currently designed. 2 traffic lanes and 2 separated pathways. Here's a notes don't match my slides. Maybe they do. Okay, here are a few key features of the project design. 1, it supports the AMAT's goal as stated in the June 2020 update of the MTP of increased multimodal connectivity for all modes of travel. It embodies the concept of complete streets. That is, it provides for reasonably safe use by all types of potential users, even if the anticipated number of those users is small. It provides traffic calming on Brayton and Academy using roundabouts and curves. It meets future traffic demand as identified by a 2016 traffic analysis using the AMAT's traffic model. This project is funded through the STIP and has no TIP money in it. This project has been through extensive project-specific public involvement. As a visual representation of that, I have this slide, not intended to be readable as a slide. I'm hoping you can read it in the hard copy. Just a list, public outreach activities since 2016. This slide shows the things from the last slide that are specifically in coordination with AMATS and or the Muni regarding this project. Okay, so as a baseline for looking at pedestrian only options, this is what the project area would look like after pulling out the connection. So what would happen here is we would be widening the Seward Highway and we would do the active transportation facilities along Brayton. The cost of this work is estimated at $8 million. This $8 million is included in the $40 million cost of this current design in this area, but it is not included in the costs of the options that will come after this. So those are costs in addition to this $8 million. Concept 1 is a bridge over the highway. The bridge would be approximately 400 feet long and 25 feet high. This design shows the smallest footprint that will comply with the Americans with Disability Act. Estimated cost is $18 million. Concept 2 includes the roundabouts, the work on Academy, and the pathway connection under the highway, but no vehicle connection. Seward Highway is raised, but the size of the bridge required is smaller than the bridge required for the current design. The estimated cost of this option is $27 million. Oops, went too far. Option 3 is for an active transportation tunnel under the highway, under Brayton, and under the scooter off-ramp. These must all be raised in order to keep the tunnel out of the groundwater. The tunnel is approximately 400 feet long, which is roughly the length of a cruise ship. The estimated cost of this option is $22 million. Presentation. Questions?
Would you go back to the one that showed the roundabouts?
One?
Yeah. So would it need a roundabout on the left side? It looks like the or that roundabout is not really needed. Because it's southbound.
We did not look at whether we could get by with one roundabout. Originally, we started with the other 2 options, right? One over, one under. And then there was a suggestion that maybe, where I'm going. That maybe, it would make sense to go ahead and build all this infrastructure and just not connect it, so I threw that in as an additional option. But you might be right, that we may not need one of those.
Yeah, I don't think we, either one of them actually, because of, so you can't like, you wouldn't need any left turn to just be.
It is true, though, that if we take them out, we lose the traffic calming effects.
If you could go back to the Anchorage slide or the, you know, public involvement slide with municipality of Anchorage. So looks like receive, or you went for the context sensitive solutions. I see that in bold there. So planning and zoning. And I would assume that you guys got approval from planning and zoning.
We did, got approval in July 2017, included, on a condition that the design is substantially compliant with the preferred alternative identified in the draft design report. Which did include grade separated undercrossing at Scooter Academy with ramps to and from the south and roundabouts. So we have approval for the design with the current scope.
And as far as planning and zoning commission's role in the CSS process, what's their overall role? I don't know if Greg or, you know, anybody else here might be able to answer that question. If my memory serves me right, I think that, you know, generally their role is to determine a project's compliance with local municipal plans and elements like that. So, you know, including land use plans, and any of the other, overall local.
That's my understanding as well. And I did double check with the approved, plans that apply here, and, it is compliant. The current design is compliant with all of those. I can go through them, like.
So looking at the costs again. Mind. So this one, you said it was 18 million, and is that plus the 8 million?
Plus the 8, yes.
And so the 40 that you would give initially for what is currently there is like the total project. So this would be, like, if we want to do like a comparison, right? I guess I was envisioning at the end, kind of like compare all the different alternatives with the different costs where everything is like apples to apples. Can you help provide an apples to apples?
Yeah, the thing is, the 8 million in what I've called a baseline here is included in the 40 for the current design, but is not included in any of these others. So if you add 8 million to each of these, then you compare it to the 40.
Okay, so we've got 40 for existing, got 6 for over. We've got 35 roundabouts and under. I still have questions about whether you need a roundabout now that I see it. And then next one is about 30 under, like comparison to comparison. And so that, like, if I look at the cost standpoint, like, you know, I guess I'm a traffic engineer and I'm thinking about kind of technical questions and But what I suggest, right, if we're making a recommendation that the cost is, from the cost standpoint, 30 versus 40 is how we compare this one. From the safety, this does get the pedestrians under Brayton. So it has, but it's a long tunnel, which isn't very comfortable. That long. I guess I'm curious about some of those other kind of technical questions, if you can speak to maybe the safety elements. Have we asked for some of those sorts of questions? Just a cost estimate to show us.
So, I'll just kind of step in real quick and just remind everyone, the policy committee did ask about the feasibility of making this change to the project at this point. I don't know if anyone from DOT can talk about that. Because they wanted the technical expertise as well as, is it, feasible to make this change to this project and what that would take? I mean, that's some of the questions as well.
Well, it wasn't in the request, but certainly something I've thought about. The overall arc of one of our projects starts in planning where a problem is identified, then moves to our environmental where alternatives are looked at and one is selected. Then we move forward with design of the selected alternative. So if we're going to make a substantial change to the scope, seems to me we go back to the environmental. And we don't really go into an environmental phase saying, here's the result we want. Want to end up with only non-motorized. Go into it saying, what are all the different ways we might solve these problems? What are the costs? What are the benefits? What are the impacts? Out of that analysis with a recommended outcome. So we could certainly go back and redo the environmental process. I would say there's no guarantee the environmental process would give us this result as the best solution.
Yes, is the only way it would is if you were doing this as a non-motor to begin with, and then sure, it's gonna come out. Looking at it. Where are you at in terms of 95% or something?
We're 99.9%.
And, is funding already in place for the construction? I don't know when construction was happening.
We're looking at obligation in April for this, for construction and utility funding. Don't believe it's in the current STIP for 2023, but there's an amendment plan.
You say it's not in the,
It's not in the current STIP, and the current STIP goes out to, so it's in 23, beyond 23 right now, but understand that this potentially could be included in an amendment this winter.
I don't know if this has any bearing on this. I know we always talk about, we have a project and then we end up not doing it and the potential to pay back, but this would be, you have it's planned as a road project, motorized project, for lack of a better term, roadway project. And if you pivot at the last second and change it to just only, there's probably, you may have spent a lot of extra money on designing a road, but you don't, is there any challenge with, or any potential for having to repay any of that part of the design? Just, is that an issue or not?
Ultimately, FHWA is the one that
Well, there you go.
makes the determination
Yeah.
of any non-participating. So we would have to bring that to FHWA.
So if it was, if our recommendation, let's just say theoretically, was to suggest the revised that is passed, what would that look like, kind of implications, process in the project? I think before, one of the things, it would have to go into kind of a rescoring, and so we wouldn't know like when it would happen. Have you refined kind of that process might look like, or ever find thoughts on where we would be in that case?
I guess part of the challenge is why would we make, so any of those discussions of you're redesigning this project in our discussions with FHWA, to remove the vehicular connection here. And they would probably ask why, because it's consistent with a lot of plans that we're talking about, context. So that would be a challenge in my mind. Why do we need to do this redesign?
There need to be a justification on the agency, FHWA, about it. And kind of, yeah, I guess, what are the other implications that you would say? Like, would it eventually, like, is this a feasible, like, project here that we're looking? When might this get built, if it did get built, or other challenges they get?
I haven't worked through any of that. I mean, as of right now, department was asked to present undercrossings and overcrossings.
I could point out that these project features I chose specifically because they apply to the current design and except for the last two would not apply to a pedestrian only option. I suppose if the third one, if you put the roundabouts in, you'd have that, but we would be not in compliance with the MTP's goal of multimodal connectivity, all modes. We would not be using a complete streets concept because we're leaving one of the modes out. Would not meet the future traffic demand. I think those would be hard to, it doesn't meet the approval that we got from the Planning and Zoning Commission. So all those questions would have to be reopened. Why did we choose not to comply with these plans?
Aaron, can you remind me the specific language? What did the policy committee ask of us and what did we ask of design team? I don't know.
Yes, I can look that up really quickly. Go to VAM. Hi.
That was the August meeting? Or September meeting?
I'm having issues with my PDF. It gives me 30 seconds to read and then it closes, so I may have to open it a few times. So at the policy committee meeting in August, they asked this exact language. Evaluate the feasibility and impacts of only including a non-motorized underpass at 92nd Avenue and Scooter and not having a vehicular underpass. Then the technical advisory committee added the following language. The TAC is asking for assistance in reviewing the request from the PC and the assembly resolution and provide written follow-up and in-person meeting. This response should include an analysis and cost estimate for non-motorized grade separated concepts to include at least one over and one under.
So the first part, can you read that first part again?
So this is what the PC asked, word for word. Evaluate the feasibility and impacts of only including a non-motorized underpass at 92nd Avenue and Scooter and not having a vehicular underpass.
So I think the questions that I was asking was kind of about that feasibility, like would that be, could that be a project? Right, or did you just look at the feasibility from metrics versus like project versus?
So strictly speaking, our process does not allow for us to say, we're going to change this design and it's going to be. All we're allowed to do is say, we want to look again at what is the right thing to do here. And again, go back to the environmental process and go through that. And we're specifically not supposed to decide what the outcome of that is before. So the feasibility of just making this change is really zero. However, the feasibility of going back and reopening the whole question of what is the correct thing to build here is feasible. It certainly is going back to the beginning, pretty much the beginning of the process. So it would take us, I would say, 5 or 6 years to get a design completed, unless we ended up discovering that the design we have is the correct one.
Was a non-motorized only undercrossing ever officially part of that discussion, or is that why it
It
started at the very
never
beginning?
was because it didn't meet the goals in the MTP.
So it's kind of fair to say that we don't know if the process would end up with a non-motorized only undercrossing. We'd have to start back over.
Right.
And we don't know how long it would take, but it wouldn't be anytime soon. But if we continue on where we're at 99% right now, then we would have additional non-motorized facilities in conjunction with the.
That's all correct.
The reason I asked that Aaron look up exactly what the the policy committee asked of us, evaluate the feasibility and impacts of et cetera. So, and we asked DOT to do that, they've done that. Frankly, the policy committee didn't ask us to make a recommendation as to whether the project changed or moved ahead as it is. They asked us to evaluate the feasibility and the impacts, and we have that now. We have this document and Christina's presentation, which explains the impacts of making the changes, the cost of the changes, compliance or non-compliance with the various plans, with the context sensitive solutions process that's been done. So I'm in my mind, I'm not sure exactly what we would do now, other than recommend that this be forwarded to the policy committee as presented to us, or not be forwarded, and we ask for more information. It seems to me that that's our decision space right now.
Was there a specific request that we like provide anything?
You know, what I read to you guys is verbatim what they told me in the meeting, and they voted on and approved. I wrote it down and read it back to them, I believe, 3 times for clarification, and everyone agreed that is what they were asking. So we put it on as an action item for today, in case you wanted to act on it. If we hadn't included it on as an action item, you would not be able to act on it in any way, shape, or form. So it was put on there as a just in case. Because if it's an action item, you don't have to act on it if you don't want to. If it's not an action item, you can't do anything with it.
Right. So, go ahead. Okay.
Just a couple of thoughts. Yeah. I could spend a lot of time talking about process and our purview over state managed NHS projects. That enough, I won't go into that, but my role here is to represent the planning department, and along with the things that you already mentioned about it being It's also listed in the 2040 land use plan as transit support. Doesn't necessarily say transit route there, but it says this is what we should look at for transit. So obviously, if you do non-motorized, that would be pretty challenging. So I think that's another plan that you could add in to show, if this committee does suggest sending it to the policy committee. Other thing that you could show that suggests how it's designed is supporting planning. That Jared mentioned.
It's great. There are other questions or comments from the community? One thing that kind of as like what you did, Craig, I've also been thinking about this from a traffic standpoint. So I appreciate you coming and giving us all the kind of the comments and perspective. And as a cyclist, I did spend some time biking underneath the Diamond interchange, and I've biked underneath the 76 lake crossing, which is probably pretty comparable to what this is. And as I look at the two, I mean, the 76 is a lot more comfortable, a lot better for cyclists than what currently is under Diamond. So part of my thought as a non-motorized user and traffic safety standpoint, sure, a non-motorized only facility would be even less complex with motor vehicles, but if the comparison is doing nothing and having this connectivity for the non-motorized user has that benefit. The second thing that I was thinking was the Independence Park area. If there was the motorized connection as well as non-motorized, they would be able to access all of the development on the other side of the freeway without having to turn on to Diamond and be able to access the arterial network. And so from connectivity, even from just local connectivity, there's additional kind of connection and benefit from motorized aspect as well. So I was having a hard time from the traffic side seeing where the non-motorized would have additional benefit above and beyond. I just wanted to make sure I asked some tough questions to be able to really hear what those implications are, because that makes a difference of, are we comparing, what are we comparing? Are we comparing like nothing? Which it sounds like we kind of are, because we can't like predetermine that a non-motorized will be a feasible alternative. So kind of from the traffic safety standpoint, having a multimodal has benefits. Transit benefits, non-motorized because they have a better connection, has benefits for people. Neighborhood because then they have a way to access the other side without having to go on the Diamond. So I see a bunch of those sorts of benefits. And then the question that comes to me is how would the Academy Vanguard project that connects to Abbott be constructed and designed in a way that doesn't create kind of a high-speed throughway to this connection. So if that design was such that it wasn't sucking traffic off of Diamond, that was more serving the local at another route, then maybe that would address some of the high volume concerns that. So those are some of the thoughts that I have from the traffic. Other questions, comments?
Sure, yeah, just a couple. So if we got, the project had approval from planning and zoning back in 2017, 2018, are there any changes in the plans that you're, to the best of your knowledge, that are counter to, the overall project scope in this space? I mean, I'm just thinking the AMATS, non-motorized plan, came out since then. Does this include all of the features that were in any of those documents that came after the CSS process?
So here's what I found when I looked at these plans. The non-motorized plan calls for a pit crossing of Seward and the pathway on the west side of the highway, but nothing on Academy or Brayton. Our project has additional in that. So we are providing a crossing of the Seward Highway and the pathway on the west side, also providing active transportation facilities on Academy and Brayton. In the non-motorized plan, the bike plan indicates a bikeway on Academy from Vanguard to Old Seward, shared use path west of the highway, which currently exists, and nothing on Brayton. So again, we've got bike lanes on Brayton and Academy, which above and beyond what was in the non-motorized. The NTP, we've talked about, this project and the Academy Vanguard project are both listed as recommended projects. The purpose of this project is given in the NTP as addressing capacity, congestion, rate. The purpose of the Academy Vanguard project is connectivity and access in the MTP. The LRTP calls for connectivity under the Seward Highway at 92nd, 76th, and 68th, saying it offers more route choices to Midtown and downtown destinations. The land use plan shows 92nd built through to Minnesota. And as Craig pointed out, is a transit supportive development. And then I looked at the transit plan, but there's nothing in the transit plan about how they might use roads that aren't yet built. So there's really nothing relevant.
And then, follow-on question. So, as far as traffic studies go, you know, I think I heard when I attended some of the other meetings and resolutions from assembly, you know, assertions about, the traffic warrant or the traffic need. So, you know, just as a, for instance, were the traffic studies associated with this project done post to Cottony?
They were, but the traffic analysis for this section of the project was done in 2016. Ticotin, I believe, was hearing up 2008 to 2012. I think it was completely open in 2012, with my information.
So are you aware of a significant change in traffic since the traffic studies were done in 2016 to now, even, you know, post, you know, when the pandemic began?
There was a slight dip during the pandemic, but it's pretty much come back up if you're talking about existing traffic. Pretty much come back up to where it was. No, we don't have any reason to believe there's been substantial change in the traffic due to Ticotin opening. And I think we would look to the model. Whether AMETS felt like the model needed to be changed due to different assumptions.
So, and I guess what was the basis of the model that was used on the project?
It was the AMETS model that was used.
Any other questions or comments from? Okay, let's move to any questions or comments from. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Who's managing are you doing?
There's Nancy P. And she also has her hand up. So read them or let her talk?
I guess that's a good question. If she's got the 3 minutes, we better speak, right?
Yeah, go ahead and just let her talk. Her handwritten comments were part of that. But Nancy can do it. Nancy, go ahead and introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Nancy Pease. I would like to address a couple of quick questions. One is, I think that the examples that the DOT has put forth to you are kind of cold oatmeal and week-old donuts. They're not practical. They're not, they don't fit the sites very well. The idea that you would need 2 roundabouts for a pedestrian-only under crossing is not substantiated. There's also no reason why you would need to put the new southbound off ramp on ramp all the way through the roundabout from Diamond. So I think you should question what you're actually being offered in return. In regard to the sufficiency of the report of feasibility, the policy committee asked for analysis, and I don't think you're getting enough analysis here. DOT just spoke briefly to the traffic figures. DOT's own east-west average daily traffic figures show that east-west traffic on Diamond has been declining since 2014. It did bump up a little bit in 2018 and then down again, but it is not increasing. This is not a major traffic need. So if we were to go back to the design boards for 5 to 6 years, there's not going to be a pile up at Diamond. And then in terms of issues that were not looked at in previous land use plans, there was not the concern about induced traffic and parking demand. There was not as much concern about particulates and greenhouse gas emissions. You know, the 92nd future extension, that would create yet another arterial and more induced demand. As far as the 92nd future transit corridor, yes, it is in the land use plan, but it's at the bottom of the list of 8 or 9 intended transit corridors. So it's not a priority. It's not where the city is going to be putting bus service. With regard to it being, there's also the question of devaluation of land and land uses along what will become a major collector or arterial. And then look really seriously at the safety of pedestrians, because that is my understanding was one of the major reasons is how to get people from the east to the west side of the highway. 2 things there. The traffic from the Diamond on-ramp is going to be diverted down to the roundabout. So east-west pedestrians are going to have to cross all that freeway-bound traffic. This is not a safe design. And in addition, Brayton Road becomes an on-ramp for a whole lot more freeway traffic. And there isn't much of a separation there for the pedestrian pathway. There's just a very narrow right-of-way, not nearly as much right-of-way as would be recommended for traffic that will probably be traveling 50 miles an hour or so. So with all these questions,
You could wrap that.
yeah, I think you should ask for additional analysis of traffic and safety and land use. The compliance issue is highly selective and highly subjective. It's like the Bible. You can pick out passages to support whatever you would like. So finally, I just say that the bottom line is the future that you see in maximum freeway investments within our limited urban footprint, or are you emboldened to try to build differently for safer, more sustainable transportation, equitable, active transportation? Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. I do have a follow-up question for Nancy, if that's all right. The undercrossing that showed it going under Brayton and the highway. Nancy, is that what you were envisioning as, you know, the discussion about having a non-motorized only undercrossing?
I'm sorry, I just was temporarily disconnected. Could you repeat the entirety of your question?
So you spoke to the roundabout as not being kind of the undercrossing concept, but they also showed the second one that had the undercrossing of Brayton and the highway. And I'm wondering if that is what was envisioned in your mind with regards to an undercrossing non-motorized only.
I don't have the designs up before me, but they showed an example that had an undercrossing that was aligned between between Scooter and Academy, and there were still 2 roundabouts in it.
This one right here. You see that on your screen?
Yeah, no, that's not what I was envisioning. That's an out of direction underpass, so it's not super convenient. I was thinking more in terms of the one that had the 2 roundabouts, but without the 2 roundabouts.
Go back to the Okay, so not roundabouts, but not grade separated from Brayton.
That would be something you should ask. What would it look like with grade separated crossing of Brayton and without grade separated crossing of Brayton? But you'll see on the left, there's no reason to have that roundabout and have all that freeway on-ramp traffic come down through a roundabout where you're trying to get pedestrian flow east-west.
Okay, thanks, Nancy.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Anyone online? Okay, we have the audience. Go ahead, Wolfgang.
Yeah, Wolfgang on DOT. With over 300 projects in development at any one time, I don't get buried in details, but what I worry a lot about is the process. So when we talk about the feasibility aspect of making changes like this, I think Chris spoke best to it. The ability to go back and force in a predetermined outcome, like a non-motorized only outcome, is not part of the process that we adhere to. EPA, which develops, of course, the purpose and need, the range of alternatives. The most we could do would be able to go back and hit the reset button completely and redo everything and see what that outcome was. And it may very well be that it's non-motorized only, but I haven't seen anything. I know Nancy speaks to some of the changes in east-west traffic volumes, but I don't see anything substantive that would change the outcome and be a reasonable expectation. And I would also kind of draw back, if you think back to the Martin Luther King Drive extension and the Piper connection there, where the basic foundational assumption of that project changed. Where we started a project, we started accepting and expending federal funds, and then we shut it down as a no-build alternative. If you remember, we had to send a letter to Federal Highways explaining why we were stopping the project and rendering under a no-build alternative in order to allow the Federal Highway Administration to participate in those costs. This is on a much bigger scale for us to rewind everything, restart everything, and be able to explain to our federal funding partners why we were doing this. We would need to be able to make that argument to them about what has fundamentally changed that causing us to go back and restarting the entire project over. And concern to me is just the eligibility part of it. I want you to kind of strongly consider, is there really a basis for going back and doing this? That's changed that we would be able to make that argument. Difficult for me to see that.
Okay, thank you, Wolfgang. Do we have any other public comments? Anything online, Jenny? Okay, so then it comes back to the committee. What is the will of the committee? Kent raised the question, do we need to make a recommendation? Do we just recommend that this get moved to them? Do we not make a recommendation? I guess. What are the thoughts about
I think,
going forward?
other than asking that this presentation get given to the policy committee, I think that's the extent that we've been asked to do. For the discussion, direction, so motion, happy to do that, but this presentation is the policy committee.
Other thoughts? I guess in the spirit of what I felt like the policy committee was asking, it seems like they might want to know what our perspective is as the advisory committee, the impression that I got. So putting it to them to review without us expressing some of our thoughts seems like it's gonna come back to us and they're gonna ask us for you is my concern, I guess.
Only go on the direction given. Hear the analysis. Wasn't asked to make a suggestion with maybe I don't. Guess I kind of refer to our policy committee chair if he thinks that's what we were expected to do. I wasn't in the room, but
Is that a fair question that we could ask? Given that one?
maybe not. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
I don't think Wolfgang was at that meeting.
Okay.
Todd was the one chairing the meeting.
Okay.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah.
There you go. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, Sure.
I mean, I guess I bring it back to what I started to say at the beginning is, this is not our allocation. We don't get to decide, other than saying yay or nay. We could vote to remove all funding from this project. That's it. That's all we get to do. We have a veto. We don't get to tell them how to design it if they have wider shoulders, whatever they have. My understanding is the policy committee said, hey, take a second look and see if there's a possibility of just doing download. But other than that, I do not feel comfortable telling them that.
Is there,
Having them look at it, hear this presentation.
does it make sense in addition to forwarding a presentation or recommending they review the presentation, have a statement that we work out, that we feel like we could say something to the effect of things we've expressed, that it's our understanding that restarting, they would require a restart. There would be no guarantee that there would be an undercrossing of the third alternative as requested. And we have concerns or something to that effect.
My thought would be that would be a 45-minute exercise of writing a resolution in a committee meeting like this, and that sounds painful.
Okay.
I mean, coming back with a resolution next month would be easier than hashing out those details in the meeting like
And I
this.
guess they only asked
That's my
for,
experience.
they only asked for like an update, right?
Yeah, in November, I'll be providing them an update of what was discussed here.
Would it be okay to ask them if they want something specific from us, and if they do, then maybe draft resolution, we can like kind of come to an agreement on so that we can provide something if that's what they want, and if not, then it's good just to forward this to them.
Yeah, I can do that as part of my update. Let them know that there was discussion back and forth by the group about what exactly was being asked of them. Do you want some kind of feedback from the committee about their thoughts on this, or did they just want this information provided? If that's what you want, then I'm happy, I would ask you make a motion of that, so this is all part of the process, and I can follow back if I have any questions.
Other thoughts? Does that sound good to everyone, or do you have something else?
I tend, I think, to fall where Craig is. And the policy committee is made up of experienced people who presumably knew what they were asking us to do, which was to evaluate the feasibility and the impacts. We've asked the project team to do that. I mean, I'm open to considering any motion that's put on the floor, but my thinking right now is that we forward that evaluation to the policy committee with perhaps a recommendation that the project team come in and give the same presentation they give to us. That is what they asked us to do. I would like to think that if they had wanted us to make a technical recommendation as to whether the project should proceed or be halted, or that we make a motion, a recommendation that the scope be changed, that they would have asked us for that, and they didn't. So those are my thoughts on it.
Okay, so it sounds like it'd be good to have a motion, so that. Proceed.
Here's a rough guesstimate for a motion. I move that we ask DOT to present this topic to the policy committee and request direction from the policy committee what they want the TAC to do. Other than that, could fine tune it, but
One additional,
there you go, better, that's clear.
Clarification.
Clarification of what they want the T and what actually they'd like.
okay, moved by Craig and seconded by,
Can you reread the motion, as edited?
Maybe, it's maybe, but. We asked DOT to present this topic to the policy committee and request clarification from the policy committee. Action. Yes, it take.
what actions?
Actions for clear.
Can Wolfgang provide some perspectives, or Do we, like, how does that fit in the
I
process?
feel like I'm sitting right here.
He is our chair, after all. You were the chair of the meeting, so you decide if you would like to call on somebody to ask. You are, we got a second, so we're able to do that? Okay, so we got a second. I just want to make sure we're following the process.
Okay, go ahead, okay.
So looking at DOT, I think maybe from a policy, really centered to the issue is the feasibility of these alternative outcomes. Is it feasible that something other than what is currently designed to be implemented into this?
That sounds like what DOT, the policy would ask.
So from a technical perspective, if the question is, what is the feasibility of altering the current design to include only a non-motorized outcome? That's the question being asked. And from a technical perspective, understanding the process that we go through in federal traffic modeling and listen, need, and prefer alternatives and alternatives that development. And we feasibly go in and take any one of these particular non-motorized outcomes and alter the design as shown today. That might be one way of looking at it. Because if it's not feasible to propose an outcome that was different than the recommended, the only real feasible alternative is that so we don't risk having predetermined outcomes of violation of NEPA. Then that's what, from a technical perspective, from PAC about feasibility of that. Or alternatives that we.
I think the perspective we're sharing from this motion is that that's what the DOT presentation would provide to the policy committee. And I guess the question, is it coming from DOT versus us as a committee having a statement on that? And it sounds like because of what Kent had said,
Well,
they'll get that out of the presentation.
well, yeah, so if I may, that's what I said, because I was reading the verbatim statement, but hearing Wolfgang, I take away from his comments that no matter what they said, the policy committee is perhaps looking for not only us to forward this, but to provide a recommendation. Yep.
Well, I guess my thought is hearing the motion, we probably know that's what they discussed, but that's not the direction they gave. And, no offense, you weren't at the meeting. Sean may have been at the meeting, but Todd, who was chairing, it's not there, not here. So that may have been what they wanted. I don't know, but that's not what they said. So, and it's just, I know it's just dragging this out. It's maybe kind of silly in a way. But, and I'm happy to do that. I've given you my thoughts on the planning perspective on why I think this project should stay as is, but.
Yeah.
As I was there listening to the discussion, I kind of agree with Wolfgang on this, because I think what the policy committee is really looking for is your guys' technical expertise on should this project be changed or not. And if you just send them the presentation, they'll be like, well, what does the TAC say? And then am I gonna have to come back next month? I'm like, if we want to save a little bit of time, I would recommend you have some kind of statement that says, based on our discussion, X, to go along with it, forward the presentation to them so they can do it, and this is what the TAC discussed. Make it a simple statement, because I think you all kind of said the same things. But that's just from my perspective.
Right, and that's kind of what I was speaking to a little bit of, trying to have some sort of statement of our committee. But I do appreciate the clarification of being on speaking to the feasibility. That narrows it, it makes it a little bit easier to come up with a statement that's simple, that's concise, that gets to the heart. Technical. So, does everyone, go ahead, Sean?
Sure. I mean, so I think we've got a couple things in front of us. There's the feasibility, the question for the project about, what does it look like, timelines, you know, what's the potential outcome? And then really, you know, there's, in my mind, there's the question of, you know, even Ms. P's share, you know, concerns about this wasn't what they envisioned, right? And so I think, you know, this roundabout alternative, right? I think if we move forward to the next alternative where we've got the undercrossing that's nearly 400 feet long, right? The usefulness and the usability by anybody after we build this facility for, you know, $30 million, is it actually gonna, are people gonna feel safe? I would say I would not send my 14-year-old daughter, you know, to go through a grade separation off to the side where there's nobody that can view it. You know, this isn't a viable alternative that actually results in people using this, right? It's a tremendous amount of money for something that's not gonna be used, right? So then you start going to other concepts, right? So what about an overcrossing, right? The overcrossing, you're nearly 3 stories in the air, you know, having to get up to this thing. Potentially add in stairways and other things to cut down on some of the circuitous routes, you know, off, you know, out of direct path kinds of considerations. I don't know that this actually gets used, right? Okay, then go to the roundabout alternative. We can talk about, you know, whether or not there's a roundabout or not, you know, what legs of it, what this provides. You know, you can start mixing and matching. I think Brad and a few of us, you know, can probably comment on safety concerns associated with at-grade mid-block crossing, is what we call it in the transportation field. If you just put in an undercrossing just underneath the highway and without any traffic calming features. I used to live just off of Brayton, and people were driving 55, 60 miles an hour, quite often faster than they were on the highway on that frontage road. And I was on the shoulder of the highway, shoulder of Brayton, you know, pushing my daughter, my son at the time, you know, in a stroller, taking my daughter to the soccer field where I coached her in soccer, right? I mean, I know this space, and you know, if you just have a straight stretch of a frontage road through there, there's no traffic calm other than eventually adding the bike lane and the pedestrian facilities that you can push people off to. But they're still going, you know, flat out highway speeds. There's not a lot of traffic calming kinds of things you can do on a frontage road that's a straight stretch. So then you're like, okay, well, you know, how do you get them across Brayton to go in an undercrossing that's, you know, shorter without some kind of traffic calming feature like a roundabout? Well, you know, you can throw in a pedestrian flashing beacon, and there's all kinds of alternatives that we know don't work really well on a high-speed facility. And so, you know, people's vision for what it is that they want may not be commensurate with the end result that they're going to get if we start playing this iteration game, you know. And intuitively, the project team probably knows a lot of these things. It didn't go through 5 or 6 different alternatives. They were only asked for one overcrossing and one undercrossing, but they gave us another alternative. So how many other alternatives are we really asking them to do, you know, when intuitively some people from the technical side of the advisory committee, you know, can probably speak to and go, yeah, those aren't really fine.
Those are good points, Sean, and I think perhaps even more important, or as important, is the fact, as explained by members of the project team and by Wolfgang, that the only, as I understand it, the only way to even put those considerations on the table for those other alternatives is to go back to ground zero on this project and start from scratch. And even then, the outcome is not certain. There is no way that's been told to me today to guide this project to a suite of only non-motorized crossing solutions. That's not what this, that's not what the funding is. So, so I was, to use your words, Mr. Chair, I was the one who kind of was moving to punt this to the policy committee. But, if we think collectively that the thing to do is to provide not only the evaluation, but a recommendation, I'm open to changing my mind on that, and I'm not sure exactly how we do that now that there's a motion on the table. Is it an amendment to that motion?
Withdraw my motion.
Second.
You have to-
And so,
To do a potential motion, throw this out there. Ask DOT to present this to the policy committee, and the TAC recommends supporting the project as currently designed.
so.
Second.
Are you, yeah, okay, second, okay. Motion made by Mr. Lyons, second by Mr. Colgates. One question that I have is whether instead of like making a recommendation, we make a statement that says, and the technical advisory committee is of the opinion that it is infeasible to replace most. It's not so much, in that case, it wouldn't be making a recommendation, it would be just stating our technical opinion on the feasibility, which I think is what I understood from what one request. Is then, it is then left up to the policy committee to make the recommendation. We're just presenting kind of the technical. And I mean, I could think of all the different reasons we've expressed to like write into and expound on that. But that's not something we can do now with the time that we have. So my question is, do we want to just have it be the recommendation as it's presented, or do we want to have?
I guess I got the sense that the policy committee was looking for direction on whether the board does go for fine. So that's why my motion was just to say, hear the discussion from Steve. Support it.
Could add a thing at the end that says the TAC finds that it's not feasible to make this change. If you want to include some of the language in the rule, they'll keep it in there.
I'd be fine either way, just trying to do our best to.
I think the addition of the statement about feasibility is what the letter asked for, so in addition to that. But I think it should be very short and sweet.
So as it stands, the motion that Craig made, either back is there.
Yes, just ask DOT to present this topic to the PC, and the TAC recommends supporting the project as currently designed.
Based on review of the feasibility presented at today's meeting.
Beautiful. Love it.
So let's see, so we recommend that DOT present the policy committee, and so my idea would be to say, and finds that it is infeasible to replace the project. Be one way, or I guess the way is where.
I think we say and recommend supporting the project as currently designed based on the feasibility of lack thereof non-motorized.
The lack of feasibility of the novel.
The infeasibility of implementing a non-motorized design.
Am I going to see an engineer?
A friendly amendment to the friendly amendment.
Okay, the infeasibility of, like that, that's not.
Okay, recommend, good luck, DOT, present this topic to the PC and the TAC. The next little bit. I'm sorry, there were like 5 of you talking about what it was to be, so
Ken, put it out.
Please read that again, this one again.
recommends DOT present this topic to the PC and the TAC.
Supports the project as currently designed. And then the last part that you had.
Yeah,
Due to the,
defines it,
Bill supports the project as
infeasible,
due to the.
defines it infeasible
due
to implement
due to the infeasibility
of implementing
of implementing
a non-motorized only design.
Yeah, I'll read it off. Recommends DOT presents this topic to the policy committee and the TAC supports the project as currently designed due to the infeasibility of implementing a non-motorized only design.
Right where it is.
We just thought.
That's it.
Okay.
That's why I said we could do an hour's worth of
Right.
wordsmithing a resolution. It's the most.
So I'll read it off again just to make sure.
Okay.
Recommends DOT present this topic to the PC and the TAC supports the project as currently designed due to the infeasibility of implementing a non-motorized only design.
So. I think you made the initial motion, Craig. Okay with that? And Cass, yeah, agree with those ones?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any
Sorry, Lauren.
objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Thanks everyone for that hard work. Action item 5B.
Hey, everyone, we have
First of all,
very little time left, so this is gonna have to be a quick race to go through this item.
45 minutes.
Yes, but we have a third item after that, that'll take a while, so. Okay. So everyone, we are bringing forward a tip amendment. The first one of the 23 through 26 tip. All excited. We just got it approved last month and we're already recommending changes.
Process work.
Yeah, you know, that's how we are here, Dana. Okay, so there's a lot to go through, but I kind of want to make sure I walk through everything and help answer any questions. So it will take a little bit, but just bear with me as I kind of speed read. So, starting with the changes, table 2 roadway. First change is update Fireweed Lane rehabilitation to current cost estimates for that project. So we added additional funding in 23 and 24 to meet those needs. Next change is Spinard Road rehabilitation. You'll see that we are recommending paying for the majority of the construction funding in 2026 with de-obligations. So de-obligations are any money remaining on a project after it has been closed out. So say you have like 100,000 after you finish the project, it kind of sits there. And the state of Alaska has the options for what to do with it. Because it was AMAT's money, wasn't used, now it goes back to the state. Well, state of Alaska headquarters has been generously saving all that money for AMATs to use. And at this point, we have about 14.8 million in de-obligations to utilize. So staff is recommending that we use all of that funding in 2026 to pay for the construction of Spinard Road instead of seeing money from 27, 26. So instead of borrowing from 27 to use it for 26, we're going to use all this de-op. So basically, we just freed up about $14 million in 27. Even though it's not part of the 4 year. So, next change, the Rabbit Creek Road rehabilitation changes. These were changes that the policy committee recommended at their meeting. So we're just updating it as part of this, as well as increasing the cost estimate for this project. Next one is adding some funding to the East 4th Avenue signal and lighting upgrade in 2023 for design, for right-of-way utilities construction. There was some additional money. Oops, that was not in there. I'm sorry. I believe 23 is supposed to be, that's an error on there. 23 is supposed to be right away. 24 is supposed to be utilities and construction. So that is an error I will correct. Next, change to Mountain Air Drive, updating this project to current cost estimates. So as you can see, we did move some money up to move this project forward much quicker. So we're very happy with that right away in 2025 instead of beyond 26, as we originally anticipated. Pavement replacement program, we're balancing the program with it. So you can see we reduce some of the funding or increase some of the funding based on that. And then last but not least is there's another one, 3rd Avenue signals and lighting. I didn't have this on here. I forgot to add it, it seems. We did update some of the information from the 3rd Avenue signals and lighting. The only reason it's not on the table here is because we just split out the funding sources. So the overall total didn't change. It's still needing 1.7 million, but we're using some of the CIRSA and then some of our STBG allocations. So we just split it between being all CIRSA funding. So that's why it's not on the table, but I do mention it in the description. And finally, last but not least, 5th Avenue signals and lighting upgrade. If you may recall, the policy committee moved the 5th Avenue and 5th and 6th Avenue signals and lighting upgrade as an illustrative project into the TIP. So if additional funding became available, that was the first project we would look at moving into the TIP. So some additional funding became available in 2026. And I worked with the municipality of Anchorage on this, and their recommendation for the first portion of this project is 5th Avenue, L Street to H Street, and start that in 2026. And then also keep the rest of the 5th and 6th illustrative that has not been, or that is not underway in case any additional funding comes later. Any questions on roadway table? Next table, table 3, non-motorized. For this one, downtown trail connection, updating the project cost estimate in 24 to the current amount there, adding about 2 million for utilities and construction. And then the next one, Fish Creek Trail, adding money in 23 and 25. 23 is design funding, and 25 is additional utilities construction, about 5.75 million additional to 25. Cost estimates are going up as they're getting further along in that project, as well as cost estimates for all projects are going up due to inflation. So that's a common theme you'll probably see throughout this. And then balancing the program again on the Anchorage area-wide trails and pathways replacement. And then for the last project, or the last kind of two, non-motorized 12 and 13, these are both projects in the same area. So working with DOT, it was recommended that we combine these projects into one project, so we could see some cost saving benefits. So instead of doing 2 separate projects at 2 separate times, just combine them into one. So this is the multi-use pathway from Tudor to Northern Lights that's along the railroad right away. And the piece that's being combined with it is the small portion on Tudor that connects to Fish Creek that, kind of ends at the Tudor, right, West Tudor, and then kind of moves west over to the Fish Creek Trail. So it's a small connection there. So it helps with completing the network. Any questions on that table? Okay, next one, plans and studies. So good news, everybody. I'm happy to announce that AMAS has come into some additional funding. We had a relative who left us some money, so we are using that to help move forward on some projects here. So going through the list, we added in some termini to the corridor plans that were already in there. You'll see that we didn't have termini for these projects, and that was an oversight as we were doing that. So I worked with DOT to add those termini in. The next change is for PLN 15. This is the street topologies plan. What we're recommending is we're actually wanting to change it from a street topologies plan to be a complete streets plan. Joni Lilm, who's going to be working on this plan, did a bunch of research, and she found Boston MPO actually did something similar where they did a complete streets plan that included street topologies in it. And we're like, that's a really good idea. Instead of doing a street topologies and a complete streets plan and then one to combine it, in 20 years, why don't we just do it all right now and get it all done with one go? So our recommendation is to combine that and add additional funding to it, because it was only, I think, 250 and now it's 450, because it'll take some additional work. Next one is the PLN 19 non-motorized facility inventory and mapping. So that additional language, or that language you see crossed out, that was language that was added by the policy committee. when they approved the tip. And would inventory platted non-motorized easements, pedestrian right-of-ways, and undeveloped right-of-ways. So I met with the right-of-way section for the municipality of Anchorage, and I met with the GIS section and the planning department director on this project to find out how we move forward on it. The Muni right-of-way section said that the inventory platted non-motorized easements is already done to how they want it. So the GIS system already has a grid map with all of the platted easements in the plats themselves that you can click on and open, and it shows you which easements that are available. They were not interested in AMATs coming along and doing any additional work on top of that. So we're recommending removing that portion there, because they said it would be duplicated efforts and they didn't want that. The next portion is pedestrian right-of-way and undeveloped right-of-way. Interestingly enough, according to the right-of-way group, in order to do that effort, to put that into a GIS layer, you would have to get a surveyor to go out and actually certify that that exists. Because the municipality of Anchorage is not going to put lines on a map unless they can certify that it's actually there. That surveyor would have to go out and spend their entire job doing that for 10 or more years to complete that effort. So that is well above and beyond what this project is intended for. So our recommendation is to remove that from the description of this project. Next one, some of that additional funding helped read up an AC corridor plan. Talking with DOT, it looks like staff time's pretty tight right now with all the 3 other plans that are going to be underway here soon. So the soonest they could get started on this plan was in 2026. So that's why you see it's out at the end of the years. Then we have the climate action plan. So we've talked about this, so you see the description there, very excited for that. And then we have the Anchorage Human Services Coordinated Transportation Plan. This, make sure I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, but this is a required plan that we have to do as an MPO and as transit. And so AMAT's is stepping in to help fund this project. I believe transit will be the one managing the project and will participate. I'm currently participating on the Matsu Boroughs version of this, so it's a requirement we need to get done, and I work with transit, and they added this language in. Any questions on table 4?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
In the memo, it looks like it still shows street typologies plan as like 1.4.
Oh, okay. We will correct that before the policy committee. Let me make notes just a second. Thank you. Any other questions on these? Okay. Next one, table 5, congestion mitigation, air quality. So this table, I reached out to the public transportation department and worked extensively on this with them. As part of some of the new funding we're getting, it's called carbon reduction funding. So this is focusing on reducing carbon as part of the transportation system. It can fund a lot of things, but it has to be able to demonstrate that it's going to be reducing carbon emissions. So planning is difficult. There are very limited planning projects that this can be used for. Roadway projects like expanding of lanes, it can't be used for that. But for things like transit, it can do that. So that is one of the best ways to do it. And so our recommendation is that we put a lot of this carbon reduction funding towards transit to help. And they asked that we put some of the funding to help expand the rideshare program, adding a good amount, I believe 500,000 a year, except in 2025, which is adding a little more. And as I believe we'll have a presentation at a later date, but the rideshare program has been very successful here. And so we want to continue keeping that moving forward. Next is adding some carbon reduction funding into the bus stop and facilities improvement in 2024, about $2 million there. And then 3 new projects based on a request from transit that we are more than happy to help with. The first is seniors and youth ride free. So as it says there, provide transit trips for people 18 and under and 60 and over. So we're providing 2 hits, $1 million a year for the first 2 years. And is that money going to be stretched out over multiple years or just for those 2 years only?
It'll be a pilot.
Okay. So they're very excited for that, for here. Next is a micro transit. So you'll see the description there. And then we have the Muldoon Transit Hub mixed use development. Any questions on table 5?
So the seniors and youth are free. The high schoolers, middle schoolers already
They do
were.
contract with ASD, so it will just be completely free. It'll replace that revenue
They don't
stream.
replace it? Okay. And so, and then it will also fold in all the.
Question on that. Could, not that I'm advocating taking money away from kids and seniors. But, could that money also be used for reduction and delay of freight, trucks, yada, yada, yada?
I think so. That could be a possibility. Yeah, we'd have to look at a specific project or need to make that determination, but it would be something we'd look into, yes.
Well, I know the freight subcommittee, the freight advisory committee probably has a list of stuff that I know spending a lot of time looking at delays and trying to figure out how to get. I'm not advocating changing anything in here right now. I'm just simply saying in the future. See if we can find anything.
Okay, that's something I can look into and get some more information on. Okay, next table is table 7, HSIP. I'm not gonna go through each of these. They're there if you guys wanna look at them. It's updating a lot of the information provided by DOT, so, and adding in 3 new projects for HSIP. So we're very excited to see some additional safety projects moving forward. Next project is update to table 8, the National Highway System. Again, this is based on request from DOT to update these project costs in here. See the changes in there. Seward to O'Malley, Seward Highway, O'Malley Road to Diamond, phase 2, upgrading that cost. Glen Highway, Airport Heights, Parks Highway rehabilitation, updating the timeline and cost of that project, and then the Tudor Road interchange, updating the timeline and cost of that project. Any questions on this? Okay, and then the last one is table 10. There's 2 in table 10. The first is updating the information for the APU road improvements project that's been underway for a little while. I got this information and it looks like it's moving it from 2024 construction to 2023 construction. And so I got sent this from the project manager on this. And the last one is adding some funding to the Campbell Track Facility Alternate Entrance Alignment Project. This is a project that was started by Western Federal Lands using the FLAP Federal Lands Access Program. And they reached out to us and DOT headquarters and said, hey, cost estimates have gone up pretty substantially on this project. Does AMAS have any additional funding available? And as we were working on this amendment, we did have a little bit of additional funding, STVG available, and supplementing with the carbon reduction program funding. So you'll see that in table 10. Thanks. Any questions on that table? I do have some edits, some errors that were found. So I'm not sure when you want me to read those off. Do you want me to read them off now or when you guys do a motion?
Big, minor?
They're pretty minor edits.
Go ahead and do it now.
Okay, first one is table 5 under CMAC. This is related to the non-motorized equipment, CMAC 13 project. This is where we're going to be purchasing non-motorized equipment for the municipality of Anchorage to replace their current units that are there. They have 14 non-motorized items that they use to help plow the sidewalks and stuff. They're pretty old. Most of them are 21 years old or older, so they're needing help. And AMATS is stepping in with our congestion mitigation. However, like everything else, the cost has gone up pretty substantially. And the funding we have available in the 3 years you see there is not enough to cover the full costs now that the cost has increased. So I reached out to DOT headquarters and they said that they will help provide an additional $500,000 to cover that in 2024 with their CMAQ money. So the change would be to add an additional $500,000 to 2024 for this line item and add a note in the description that the 500,000 is coming from DOT headquarters, so it doesn't impact our fiscal constraint. Next one is actually on, I should have started with this one, I apologize. Is roadway table, Dale and Volker upgrades. Unfortunately, when I put these projects into the tip, I accidentally listed them as collector standards. They are actually local roads. So the recommendation is to change that from collector standards to local standards for both projects. And that'll be, you know, in line with the municipality of Anchorage needs for those projects. And then the last one is the illustrative project change, 5th and 6th Avenue lighting upgrade. I accidentally was in error with the termini. As you can see there, it says H to Cordova. That's because the 5th Avenue is L to H Street. What it should be is 5th H to Cordova and 6th L to Cordova, because we're not actually moving a portion of the else of the 6th Avenue signals and lighting into the tip. So it's just a termini to make sure people are not, what happened to 6th Avenue, L to H? Well, we're not doing that yet. That's later on. So I just need to update the termini. Those are the edits I have. That was a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Table 9 stuff.
Okay, let me go through the schedule really quick. Joni, oh, thank you. The schedule is on top. There we go. So as you see before you, here's the schedule for approval. We're going to start developing these more often for everything, so everyone knows the timeline for this tip amendment is 8 to 9 months to get it approved. So just a heads up to everyone, we get one shot at this for the fiscal year of 23. So if you have changes beyond today that need to be made, that really should be done by the February 2023 meeting, because what we're going to do is we're recommending putting this out for a 45-day public comment period. During the public comment period, we're accepting comments from anyone, and we can make changes at that point. After the February 23 meeting, I strongly recommend we don't make any more changes to the tip, because that's when it goes through the interagency consultation process. Just as a heads up, the policy committee did make changes to the tip after the interagency consultation process. When they went to approve it, that gave us about a 3 to 4 week delay for approval of the tip, and that's why we went into the conformity lapse. So if we have a 3 to 4 week delay on this, that's going to push us into August of 2023, which is right at the deadline of obligating of funds. So we will be in danger of not obligating some of the funding in the tip. So just as a heads up of, I'm just providing the information. I'm not conjecturing or anything.
Okay, additional comments from, questions or comments from the committee?
Yeah, and I just back up what Aaron said, that federal fiscal year ends at the end of September, and really DOT has to turn in any of our funding requests. They want us to do it in May now, the very beginning of May. So you're already past the date that DOT is setting their own internal deadline. June and July, by the time you hit July, you're late. And we already have to start asking for permission from program development on any project related things. Yeah, we have concerns if this gets delayed anymore on any changes that we may make in our ability to enact them in federal 23. I appreciate the visual because ultimately it kind of explains why at a lot of previous committee meetings, everybody's asking, why don't we get another chance to change things? Seems like, we're always under the gun, and this kind of visually tells us why it is.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to have the visual here so people can see. And I do want to point out, we're recommending a 45-day public comment period. We typically do 30, but because we have to go through the assembly and its process, that'll probably take about 45 days anyway. So we figured, I was looking at it, I'm like, you know what, we might as well just make it a 45-day public comment period, give people more time especially since this is gonna be over Christmas. So we're hoping it'll give people a little more time to look at this and provide.
So if there are additional comments or changes or whatnot, they could be part of amendment 2 at a that would allow amendment 1 to go forward and fit and then or
If it's changes for anything outside of fiscal year 23. This, 23 is it, this is our amendment for 23. If it's for 24 or later, we'll have additional amendment times. Sorry, I'll make that more clear. We can do additional amendments later on for any of the outer years, but for 23, this is our one chance.
okay,
Yes.
got it. Thank you. Other questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from the public?
From Cheryl Richardson and James Starks.
We'll just go ahead and ask him to speak so we can do Cheryl first.
Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, thanks. I could not hear very clearly. Could you please clarify? I've got two issues. The first one is, please clarify what changes were made that required an additional interagency review, and why did that take a whole month?
We haven't done the interagency consultation at this point. Are you talking about the changes from the tip itself?
My notes say you recommend no more changes after February of 23. There were changes by the assembly, or maybe the policy committee, that caused a 3 to 4 week delay because through the interagency review is the way I heard it.
Yes, it's because any changes were made after the interagency consultation process was done. And so
I'm just asking for which changes were made by whom?
the policy committee. The
Made
policy
what
committee
changes?
changes to the tip after it went through the interagency consultation process. Because of that, we had to rerun it through the interagency consultation process, and it took us 3 to 4 weeks to get that done.
Okay, I heard that, yes, a couple times now. I'm wondering, just in general, what changes were they? And in general, why would it take 3 to 4 weeks to get that approval?
It's any change, regardless of how big or small, any change that is made.
So
The changes that were made at the time were adding in the illustrative project to the tip. There's a few others. I can't remember off the top of my head.
which did, we could point her to the minutes.
It's in the minutes on
Remember
that.
which month it was?
I would have to follow up on that too. I think it was August, September. I think it was September.
These are the original TA, the original tip. It's not this one, it's the original tip.
Correct.
Thank you.
These were to the previous tip that we're operating under today?
The 23 through 26 tip.
Okay, the current one, the new one. Okay, that sounds great. And the level of detail has been fine on that. Why does it take 3 to 4 weeks?
Because that's the process, getting all of the interagency consultation members together, getting them to review it, and then getting them to respond and write their response in a formal letter to us.
Okay, yeah. When you look at the simplicity of the process, I wonder if somebody might want to look into the time it takes. So, and I'll quit talking about that. My other issue is, I believe the assembly in its resolution 254 called for complete. Hello, can you hear me?
Cheryl, so you've only got a few more seconds, so if you could wrap up, please.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Thanks. Called for complete street studies of the downtown arterials, and I'm not seeing that in these amendments.
Because it's already in the tip.
Where
It's
is
the,
that?
The downtown engineering study.
No, sir. Tudor, Northern Lights, Benson, ACINL were the list of urban arterials that were to have complete street studies from Assembly Resolution 254.
I believe that's an assembly resolution and the policy committee didn't accept all those changes. So that was up to the policy committee to modify if they wanted to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Who was next on the list?
James Starzak.
Okay, go ahead, James.
Hello, can you hear me? Great. James Starzyk, DOT Planning. I just wanted to circle back to Sean's comment on the obligation cutoff date that program development has set for our DOT managed projects. I have had conversations with the statewide MPO coordinator who also works in the in federal aid section, and made it and got some clarification on that as it applies to AMATS projects. The reason that they have that cutoff date is to allow for federal aid to reprogram those STIP funds to other projects if they're not being obligated in a timely fashion. TIP funded projects are not reallocated by program development crew at headquarters. So that cutoff date is basically meaningless to an AMATS project. There's no function behind that cutoff date as it applies to AMATS projects. So they've made it clear to me that that's not a consideration.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, James. And any other public comments?
This is Nancy Pease. I have my hand up.
Okay, looks like Nancy. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, two things. And I'm going to ask the tech committee to actually take action on this because that's the way things seem to get done. With table 3, the language that says the program will be balanced with area-wide pavement replacement changes. I'm pretty sure I looked, those are deductions. There's money being taken out of those pavement replacement. And so let's use clear language, and let's also let people know what that means. I think it's great to boost Fish Creek in downtown, but fix it first. And we know we have many substandard trails. Be very clear what you're taking away from pavement replacement. So I'm asking the tech committee to ask for that change. The second thing is I'm asking the tech committee to ask further questions about why the non-motorized inventory is not going to include undeveloped easements and rights of way. I'm not very satisfied with the explanation we heard that the municipal right-of-way people said the inventory is how they want it, that things are embedded in the GIS map layers. That's the problem. Only muni right-of-way knows where they are. Planners don't know. Citizens don't know. Neighbors don't know. And that was the whole purpose, is to put together an inventory of these hidden assets. You have to know they're there and know where to look for them. And almost nobody does. The muni right-of-way people are not planners. My council, community council, has worked with them to try to develop some of these unplatted easements, and they've been openly hostile, citing incorrect policies. So I'm not satisfied at all, and I hope you won't be either with the idea that these assets are hidden somewhere in the muni map layers. Likewise, please ask why you have to survey right-of-ways before you put them on a map layer. Seems to me you survey at the time you go to develop, when you actually need to know where the boundaries are. So please ask those questions, those specific questions of staff, and try to get those answers before this proceeds too far for public review. And thank you very much for the 45-day public comment period. That's really helpful, especially during the holidays. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So if Nancy put those in writing, because I can't remember all of those, then those questions that she had can get addressed as part of the review process.
Only if you act on it.
I was in that meeting and we asked those specific questions and I was satisfied with the answers. So there were 2 of us from the planning department and 3 of us from the planning department in that meeting with the GIS folks, surveying, folks from right away. I was satisfied, as were the other people from planning. So
Okay.
I don't have any concerns about the response to that request.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, so what is the will of the committee?
I move that the TAC recommend this tip amendment number 1 to the policy committee for release for a 45-day public comment period with the changes outlined by Mr. Yanganelli.
Oh, this
Go
is
ahead.
Yemi Alibi. I second.
Okay. Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon, second by Mr. Leamy. Go ahead. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing no objections, the motion is approved. Next item on our agenda is the vision eval metrics and direction, item C, and I think I'll also mention we are at 4:18. So is this going to be able to have due consideration in the 12 minutes that we have left?
I don't know, Jeff, how long do you think that the committee is gonna need in order to be able to discuss this and act on it?
Well, we had planned for roughly half an hour. I was thinking as you were talking about your other agenda items that we can condense some of the background material, but we want to be sure. I would recommend that the committee hear the suggested draft alternatives. And so I would guess that would take, we can go pretty much straight to those, and that would probably take 15 minutes to 20 minutes, I assume, given the discussion we had in September.
Is this item time sensitive?
Yeah, do we need this month or can it be next month?
I think that the schedule that the Prime put together, working with AMAT staff, suggested we really need it this month because the MTP update's on a pretty tight timeline.
So,
Aaron,
do we want-
Hey, Aaron, it's
Yes.
Juan with R&M, the prime on the MTP. I'll just underscore what Jeff said, because the vision eval model is related to the travel demand model, that unless we have direction on the scenarios we want to present to the TAC today, which will need to go forward to the policy committee in 2 weeks, we won't be able to start that process with the model update.
Yeah, specifically coding the model with the material that you want to analyze for the MTP update.
Okay.
So should we extend the meeting right now? It seems like we're going to need it.
We might as well do it
And
now.
a strong suggestion by Jeff and or Juan to take into account the level of expertise by the people already and how deep into the weeds you need to get.
I guess the question then is how much should we extend the meeting?
I move to extend the meeting to 4:45.
Okay, moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Okay, hearing none, we are extending the meeting to 4:45.
Okay, Jeff, it's you. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, we do have 25 minutes now.
All right. So thank you very much, folks, for taking the extra time. As we stated, we do believe this is important to your MTP process. So Jeff Furkanja, RSG, part of your consultant team working on the MTP update. You saw my team and I in September. Thanks to Gabby Freeman and Reed Hafer, both of whom are here just to hear what we're doing. This was our plan to come back to you in the timeframe here in November to continue the work that you saw in September and to follow feedback and guidance you gave us for further analysis. And so I'm going to sort of go shorter on the background and get to the action item today for you. But please, I know that you had many questions in September, so we are certainly here to answer those as needed. The Just a quick process step. Remember, we were here before. The purpose of the vision eval modeling is to help you design the draft alternatives that will be later analyzed with the full travel demand model. The reason for that is that the vision eval model lets us do this much more quickly at this date and time, given the round that you saw in September and the round that you are going to see today. We've run well over 400 scenarios, but remember, this is general guidance to staff and the consultant team on how to craft the draft alternatives for deeper analysis in the next step of the process that Juan just alluded to. And remember that your work for today is to please recommend to the policy committee to move forward with draft plan alternatives if you agree with the suggestions that we have distilled from the first round of vision eval modeling and the second round, which we're going to talk about with you today. So I'm going to pause there. First of all, slides and sound coming through clearly, and are there any questions about the process before we get into the details?
Sound good?
All right, thank you. So thank you very much for all the thought in September. We have worked together with your staff. This is just a quick reminder of the actions. In other words, these are specific policies, programs, or investments that you could put in more detail into your eventual draft alternatives. And we tested them in this vision eval model by testing all of them, all the possible combinations. I'm not going to read this through. You had this in your packet in September. You had it in some advanced material we sent for this meeting. So this was round one. This is what you saw before. And these were the things that we tested. Now, you gave us great feedback then in September, and I want to talk about that just a little bit. You may recall that we tested different levels of future household income, and that didn't seem to be helping that much, so we dropped that. More on that in a minute. We heard very clearly that maintenance and preservation is important, but that discussion talked about the fact that the forecast models aren't really the best tools to analyze that in any way, so that'll be handled by a different part of the planning process. There was considerable discussion about the fact that we had assumed electrification as an alternative fuel. We agreed that that would serve as a useful proxy to any variety of alternative fuels that particularly public sector fleets might consider. There was a lot of discussion and thought about the land use scenario and land use as something that affects transportation profoundly. So we heard very clearly you thought it would be useful to test a different land use action. And then it came out in discussion that you are talking about policy and pricing changes around parking and parking supply. So that was one of the takeaways we got from you and the policy committee. These comments all refer to the joint work session that you were at. So with that feedback, then, we translated all that into further testing in the Vision Eval framework. And so I'm going to talk briefly about that here so you understand what we did, because it's important to your understanding of why we're suggesting certain potential draft plan alternatives. So for round two, all the actions that are in black text on this slide are the same as those actions were in round one. What we did was we dropped the changes in household income and we dropped the safety action because as we discussed, we heard that the model wasn't really producing useful results for safety. And again, there are other ways to analyze safety outcomes. So they will be treated in the plan update. It's just that the forecast models don't really have much to say that's useful. So it's not a judgment on safety. It's a judgment on the fact that the tool isn't helping you differentiate amongst different programs or investments you might make. So the two new actions that were tested, again, in combination, we tested all the possible combinations of these things, are a land use action that I'll describe in slightly more detail in a moment, and then increasing parking pricing in areas where it already exists and extending it geographically into a broader part of the Anchorage Bowl that frankly tracks your land use plan, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. So the key takeaway here is that there are some new actions in the mix of findings that we'll discuss very briefly, and they were based on feedback that we got from you folks and the policy committee members. Now, I want to basically say, since we're a little short on time, that the land use action is founded very specifically in the Anchorage land use plan. And we can go into more detail if you want, but in essence, the action increases the concentration of households or dwelling units, depending on how you look at it, and employment in the areas that your land use plan identifies as being targets, if you will, for that concentration. So for example, dense urban residential parts of your land use plan. The other thing to know, so we concentrated jobs and employment in those places. We could supply more detail if folks are interested. We also made assumptions that areas of the Mat-Su, like Palmer and Wazilla, and areas of Chugiak Eagle River, specifically the Eagle River Town Center, would be things that could logically be densified, if I can make it a verb. And so that was the fundamental difference, is relative to the baseline future projection of land use, which essentially assumes that historic development patterns continue up to the limits imposed by your land use plan and your zoning. This takes the baseline, which is, again, a past trend extended with some constraints, and takes that and concentrates it in places where your plan wants to concentrate it, but the total growth within Anchorage itself is the same. It's just moved in space. So having said that, we wanted to move on to talking about what these findings taken together suggest for your potential plan alternatives. And there's a little more background here, and there's more detail we can get into about what the statistics show. But taken together then, there were some findings, and I wanted to issue some just sort of disclaimers or caveats about the planning process here. As I've repeated several times, the plan will address preservation and maintenance, and it will address safety. It's just that the forecast models don't give you particularly useful differentiating information about those things, because the forecast models are designed to analyze other aspects of system performance. However, the footnote remains the same that we discussed about in September. Some of the actions that are policy, program, and investments do have an effect on those things, particularly on the revenue side. So any revenue action, whether it's a state fuel tax increase, a VMT charge, increasing parking pricing, produces revenue that could help you with preservation, maintenance, and safety investments. We talked about equity in September. The alternatives analysis that is forthcoming in the travel demand model and other planning tools will address equity. The outcomes that we're seeing suggest that the pricing actions that you might contemplate as part of your plan should probably be accompanied by some mitigation for low-income populations. You can think of that as a rebate or a discount or an exemption to certain pricing policies. But the finding, and we can explain where this comes from in more detail if we have time and interest, but that's just an overarching observation that equity is going to be studied further, and that the modeling we've done to date suggests that you might want to consider mitigation steps as part of the plan. And then finally, the concentration of households and employment that we alluded to as the land use action was found to be impactful. In other words, it makes a difference. And so I just wanted you to know that. And we therefore are suggesting that you include a land use action in the draft alternatives that will be further tested. With that said, here are the possible alternatives that grew out of what you saw in September and the discussion that you had together with the PC in the work session. And I'll have a little bit more information on them in a moment. And then, as I said, we can then take a breath and expound more on the underlying details. What we are seeing is that, as we sort of referred to it in the September discussion, given your planning goals, to which all of this analysis has been tied to the best of the tool's abilities, it seems that an alternative, a draft alternative that I've labeled for discussion purposes, minimize greenhouse gas emissions and air pollutant emissions in general, which would also address some of the commentary you made about the fact that you care deeply about other, well, the whole environment would be the way I'd phrase it, including water quality, the built and the natural environments in terms of flora, fauna, et cetera. That alternative might be helpful there as well. Given the fact that you have goals around economic prosperity, and there was discussion of freight mobility during the September debrief, the alternative we kind of labeled at that time something for all goals is something that we suggest you consider. And then, because of the interest in land use and the fact that it does make a difference to the transportation system performance measures that are directly relevant to the MTP, we suggest taking each of those and then testing them with and without the land use action. In other words, with and without the concentration or extra concentration of households and employment. And so that's just a list of 4 potential alternatives that we are suggesting that AMATs consider as the draft alternative list going forward. Now, what we've done then is to make this a little more understandable is to create a table that indexes all of the actions that were tested in the vision eval modeling and cross-references them to columns that are those 4 alternatives. And the red text is what's different. And I want to be very clear here that these are not fully prescriptive. It's not that we're going to, as a consultant team and your staff, actually implement exactly what's here, but this is general guidance for looking at the list of nominated projects and looking at the list of nominated programs and working with those to craft a realistic plan alternative that follows this general guidance. Having said that, you can see here that the scenarios, each pair of them, the 2 columns to the left and the 2 columns to the right, are basically the same, except in each pair, except for land use. So the minimized greenhouse gas emissions has a lot of investments in active transportation infrastructure and programs, an investment in travel demand management, a significant investment in transit revenue miles, and transit service configuration to cover more of the region. It includes both the fuel tax increase assumption and a VMT charge at 3 cents per mile. It includes system management and operational efficiencies. It does not include adding road capacity, which is the major difference that it has between minimized GHG scenario and the something for all goals scenario. Our working assumption is that because you obviously have financial constraints as well, that some other modifications might need to be made to the something for all goals, perhaps on the amount of transit service or other investments. But the major differences are in the amount of roadway capacity. The working assumption being that because of your interest in economic prosperity and the discussion around freight mobility, that such road capacity expansion, as we design the full details of the alternative, would be focused on freight mobility rather than general purpose mobility. But you would want to check that and tell us if that's the right assumption. So,
Jeff,
yes,
sorry, I should let you know, we need to kind of wrap it up. We only have 9 minutes left for the meeting.
So that's all I have to say. The question then is, what is your guidance going forward? Or do you have further
Okay.
questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
So, quick question, Jeff, is there a timeframe difference in doing all four alternatives, or a dollar figure difference, or you're just asking for sure what we want to do, and if we say all four, you just go forth and conquer?
You mean in terms of the consultant and staff work timeframe? And no, because we've crafted it this way, the land use kind of, we basically have two alternatives with and without land use. So it's relatively easy for us to code up the model as long as we don't, it would be a little bit over the bank to do four radically different alternatives, but this is a simpler alternatives analysis. So we think this is feasible within the scope and schedule we have.
So you're saying you think it's not too much to ask if we do all four of them?
Yes. It's,
Okay.
we believe that that's doable in the scope and schedule that we have.
Do you mind going back a slide that shows table?
Not at all. There you go.
So one question that I have with regards to a few of these, like increasing some of the, state tax and BMT mileage-based fee, or, some of these are fairly substantial. I'm curious, could we add a fifth alternative that is a little bit more of a status quo so we can see kind of how they compare? Or would that speak to beyond the scope?
Well, thanks for the question. I should have mentioned that there is another alternative, which is the 2050 no build, which generally serves as a comparison point for all the action alternatives as we bring performance metrics back to you. So the 2050 no build, as I labeled it, is basically the 2050 growth with the existing and committed projects that you have now funded in the current TIP and you have funding for. So that is going to be, there is another alternative that isn't displayed here. So is the future no build sufficient to the purpose that you just described, or are you suggesting some further action alternative that is different in some way?
Yeah, I guess, what are your thoughts there on that, Aaron? Do you think it'll allow us to see, would we want projects to be part of that without some of these, or are these moving the needle a lot?
No, the projects will come when we do the TDM, the travel demand model. So the next step will be the project evaluation. This is kind of, what direction do we head in? Do we want to head in a direction that minimizes greenhouse gas emissions? And then what are some of those options that you look at for when we're selecting projects?
Okay. Yeah, I think the no build, based on what I understand at the moment, could accomplish what I'm.
Well, there's one thing I have to say as an analyst. Looking at the table now and thinking about your question, this is up to you, of course, but in places I've worked before, and MPOs I've worked with before, it's more feasible, shall we say, to assume that the state will increase the fuel tax. So the one thing that I would suggest in response to your observation that the VMT tax is a big step would be to switch. Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
If we switched the future revenue mechanism to be in the something for all goals, switch that to the fuel tax and drop the VMT tax, that would achieve something that is, again, in other places I've worked, the FHWA has said it's okay to assume the state is going to increase the fuel tax at some point because most states can point to a history where the legislature has done that within the past 20 years.
I think it's more reasonable than a BMT tax. Now, is it something that would happen?
That would be something by the legislature.
Yeah.
I don't know. We have increased the fuel tax in last.
Right.
We keep giving them big holidays.
So I think it is better to move it, but I don't know, other than the committee.
We don't do that in here. Yeah. We don't tax ourselves.
Yeah, just a quick heads up, we have
Yeah.
4 minutes left. If we want to go longer, we have to extend the meeting.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking, so the question is, in order to have time for any public comments and we'll extend another 2 minutes. There we go.
Yeah, if anyone else leaves, we'll no longer have a quorum.
Okay. Okay, so
Move to approve whatever.
We have to do public comment.
I mean, I think if I may make a suggestion, if you could, and in other situations, you could say, this is the right general framework. We ask, the PC to bless this in general with the understanding that the staff will work out some of these details. But as long as you stick to this general framework and don't alter it too much, that would be okay, just if that helps.
okay, that sounds like a great approach.
They'll have to do public comment, and that'll take 3 minutes per person, so just remember, we have the number of people, we only have 3 minutes left in the meeting.
Okay. Do we have public comment? Are there any people with their hand raised? We have one person with their hand raised. Like,
Looks like Emily Weiser.
is it
Yeah,
always extended?
Hold on, Emily, if you want to extend it, we have a couple
5
of
minutes,
people.
does that work?
We'll
Okay.
need, another 10 minutes.
Need 10 minutes, because how many people do we have?
2 people right now, so that's 6 minutes, and then anytime you have.
Move to extend 10 more minutes.
Objection? Okay, we're extended 10 more minutes. Fine, we'll do it. Get within that. Okay, go ahead, Emily.
Thanks. Yeah, this is Emily Weiser. Thanks for extending so that we can comment. I have a quick question. I was wondering, when you're talking about the densification scenarios, is that assuming that Anchorage is going to be growing in population, or is that redistributing the existing population?
Yes, it assumes that Anchorage as a whole will grow. We mentioned the stats in the prior meeting. It's something like, don't quote me on this, but something like 18% over the entire 30-year period.
I guess the question is, that 80% is assumed for all the scenarios, the land use just redistributes them.
Exactly. So we don't change the total, we change the location of where households and jobs would be, consistent
Okay.
with the plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Cheryl, I see, is got her hand raised. 3 minutes.
Well, I'll keep it under that. Thank you very much. In general, this process of Vision Eval is something that citizens have asked for decades. And it's been just very frustrating to find how little citizens have had access to the information that's being presented and to the alternatives. I can't see anything changing at this point. I can tell, I mean, if we're extending the meeting 10 minutes just to get this done, I find that deeply disappointing. Trying to think of something positive to say here. The feedback I have gotten from Vision Eval tangentially through these meetings has been very helpful. But I'm thinking that we need to plummet deeper. I guess I'm going to simply formally ask the Technical Advisory Committee to invite Jeff and his team to attend and have a work session with the Citizens Advisory Committee so that they can dig into this and understand it. It's just outrageous that this level of good quality information is being rushed at the meetings, has still not gone to the policy committee. There was no special attempt made to have a special meeting for this purpose, which there should have been, in my opinion. So it's been short shrifted, deeply disappointed. What can you do to get this information out to the wider group of very interested people in the short term, since apparently we're butting up against yet more deadlines? Thank you.
Good comment, Carol. I guess to speak to that, we did have a work session, a lengthy work session that we covered Vision Eval. And it is going to the policy committee in 2 weeks. Correct. And so whether the policy committee, yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. There are lots of things on our agenda, and We only have meetings for so long, so we're trying to hurry the best that we can, but I do appreciate that the land use aspect is out, so I definitely see positives here, addressing some of the questions that we've raised. I guess the staff want to speak to the CAC. Is some of this going to go before them or the MTP discussions?
I mean, it'll be part of the MTP discussion later on. The CAC just had their meeting. So they won't have another one for
3 months.
yeah, 3 more months.
And can some of these documents?
In addition, this technical of a detail is something that goes to the technical advisory committee. It's not something we would take to the BPAC or the Freight Advisory Committee or the CAC. It's not something that we're expecting them to have that level of technical understanding to get into the deep of this. That's not what we envisioned any of those committees for. So it makes sense that it comes to the TAC. That's where it is. And we did have a 2-hour work session, so.
Are the presentation materials available that
The consultant team can certainly make them available. It's up to AMETS and the committee, what they'd like to do with them, but yes, they can be made available. And I just checked, there is, a little bit of the, what we would call the engagement budget in the project still, for such future work. It's up again, to the AMETS staff and the committee and the PC to guide us in how to deploy those engagements. But so it's possible certainly to do some further outreach.
you guys can look at that? Okay, will do. Okay, what is the will? Looks like there's no more public comments. I'm moving on. What is the will of the committee?
I've made every motion.
It says, I move to recommend the policy committee, move forward with the 4 scenarios that are presented on this slide.
Okay,
I can read them all. Yeah, minimize, the 4 at the top.
and seconded by Mr. Lindenwood. Okay, moved by Mr. Vasquez, seconded by Mr. Lindenwood. Do we have any objection? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. The items on our agenda, we've got general permit, or we got no more plan updates. General information, I don't see anything correct. Any committee comments? And any public comments? Anybody else online? Raise their hand.
Arms raised to death.
Okay, I think that we will call that good then. Thank you, everyone, for staying a little bit later and making that all happen. The meeting is adjourned at 4:50.
Thank you. That should ring.